Linda Martinez looked at the clock on the hospital wall. It was almost 6 in the morning and she had been working for 16 hours straight. Her feet hurt, her back ached, and she could barely keep her eyes open. But she could not leave yet. 3 more soldiers had just come in from a training accident, and they needed her help. She had been a trauma nurse at San Diego General Hospital for 12 years. Before that, she worked at 2 other hospitals for 6 years, taking care of hurt people was all she knew how to do. But taking care of hurt soldiers was different. These young men and women reminded her of her own son Danny. They were brave and strong, but when they got hurt, they became scared kids who missed their families. Linda wiped the sweat from her face and walked to the next bed. A young Marine named Kevin lay there with bandages covering his arms. He was only 19 years old, just 1 year older than her Danny. Kevin had been crying because the pain was so bad, but he tried to hide it when Linda came close. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Linda asked in her soft voice. She always called the soldiers sweetheart or honey. It made them feel better, like their mothers were taking care of them. "I'm okay, ma'am," Kevin said, but his voice shook a little. Linda knew he was not okay. She had seen thousands of hurt soldiers over the years. She could tell when they were scared, when they were in pain, and when they needed someone to talk to. Kevin needed all 3 things. "It's all right to hurt," Linda told him as she checked his bandages. "You've been through something terrible, but you're safe now, and we're going to take good care of you." Kevin started to cry again, but this time he did not try to hide it. Linda held his hand until he fell asleep. She did this for every soldier who came through her emergency room. It did not matter if it was 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon. It did not matter if she had been working for 20 hours or if she was supposed to go home. The soldiers came first. After Kevin fell asleep, Linda checked on the other 2 Marines. One had a broken leg, and the other had hurt his shoulder badly. Both of them were going to be okay, but they would need surgery in the morning. Linda made sure they were comfortable and had everything they needed. Finally, at 7 in the morning, Linda was able to leave the hospital. She walked slowly to her old car in the parking lot. Her whole body hurt and she was so tired she could barely think straight, but she could not go home to sleep. Today was June 15th, and it was the most important day of the year for her. Family today was Danny's graduation day. Danny Martinez was 18 years old and graduating from Lincoln High School. He had worked hard for 4 years to get good grades. He played on the basketball team and helped other students with their homework. Linda was so proud of him that sometimes she cried just thinking about it. Linda had raised Danny by herself since he was 3 years old. His father left when Danny was little and Linda never heard from him again. It was hard being a single mother and working as a nurse, but Linda never complained. She worked extra shifts to pay for Danny's school clothes and basketball shoes. She missed some of his games because she had to work, but she tried to be there as much as she could. Danny never complained either. When Linda had to work late, he made his own dinner and did his homework alone. When she came home tired and sore, he would make her tea and tell her about his day. He knew his mother worked hard to take care of hurt people, and he was proud of her. For the past 3 months, Linda had been working extra shifts to save money for Danny's college. He had been accepted to San Diego State University to study business, but college was expensive. Linda wanted to make sure he had everything he needed. She had not taken a day off in 3 months, but she had asked for today off so she could watch Danny graduate. Linda drove home to her small apartment and looked at the clock. It was 7:30 in the morning, and the graduation ceremony started at 10 o'clock. She wanted to take a shower and put on her best dress, but she was so tired that she sat down on her couch for just a minute. The next thing Linda knew, her phone was ringing. She opened her eyes and saw that it was 9:15. She had fallen asleep on the couch and slept for almost 2 hours. The graduation ceremony started in 45 minutes, and the school was 20 minutes away from her apartment. Linda jumped up and ran to her bedroom. She looked through her closet for something nice to wear, but everything needed to be washed or ironed. She had been working so much that she had not done laundry in 2 weeks. The only clean clothes she had were more scrubs for work. Linda felt panic rising in her chest. She could not miss Danny's graduation. This was the most important day of his life, and she had promised him she would be there. She looked at the clock again, 9:25. If she left right now, she might make it just in time. Linda grabbed her purse and car keys and ran out the door. She was still wearing the same scrubs she had worn to work the night before. They were wrinkled and had small stains from taking care of the soldiers. Her hair was messy, and she had not put on any makeup. But none of that mattered. All that mattered was getting to Danny's graduation on time. Linda drove as fast as she could to Lincoln High School. She got there just as the ceremony was starting. The parking lot was full of cars, and she had to park far away from the school building. She ran across the parking lot in her white tennis shoes, the same shoes she wore to work every day. When Linda got to the auditorium, she could hear music playing inside. The graduation ceremony had already started. She opened the door quietly and slipped inside. The room was full of families dressed in their best clothes. Mothers wore pretty dresses and fathers wore suits and ties. Linda looked down at her wrinkled scrubs and suddenly felt embarrassed, but she did not leave. She had promised Danny she would be there, and she was going to keep that promise. Linda found an empty seat in the back row and sat down quietly. She could see Danny sitting with his class on the stage. He looked so handsome in his cap and gown. Linda smiled and felt tears in her eyes. Her son was graduating from high school, and she was there to see it happen. Linda sat in the back row and tried to make herself small. She did not want anyone to notice her wrinkled scrubs or her messy hair. All around her, families were dressed up for this special day. The mothers wore beautiful dresses with jewelry and perfect makeup. The fathers had on nice suits with shiny shoes. Even the grandparents looked fancy in their best clothes. Linda felt out of place, but she tried not to think about it. She was here for Danny, and that was all that mattered. She looked at the stage where her son sat with all the other students. Danny looked so grown up in his black cap and gown. Linda remembered when he was just a little boy who needed her help with everything. Now he was 18 years old and ready to go to college. The principal, Mr. Adams, was talking about how proud the school was of these students. He talked about their hard work and their bright futures. Linda smiled as she listened. Danny had worked so hard to get good grades. He stayed up late doing homework while she worked night shifts at the hospital. He never complained when she missed his basketball games or school events because she had to take care of hurt soldiers. Linda was thinking about how proud she was when she felt someone tap her shoulder. She turned around and saw a man in a dark blue uniform standing next to her seat. He had a name tag that said Tony Blake and a badge that showed he worked for school security. "Excuse me, ma'am," Tony said quietly. "I need you to come with me." Linda was confused. "Is something wrong?" she whispered back. She did not want to disturb the other families who were listening to the principal's speech. "You need to leave the building," Tony said. His voice was still quiet, but Linda could tell he was serious. "Leave?" Linda asked. "But this is my son's graduation. I'm Danny Martinez's mother." Tony looked uncomfortable, but he did not change his mind. "I'm sorry, but you can't stay dressed like that. This is a formal ceremony." Linda looked down at her scrubs. They were the same white uniform she wore every day to work. The scrubs were clean, but they had a few small stains from taking care of patients. They were also wrinkled because she had slept in them on her couch. "These are my work clothes," Linda explained. "I'm a nurse at the hospital. I just finished working all night, and I didn't have time to change." Another security guard walked over to them. His name tag said Greg Ross. He was older than Tony and looked more serious. Other parents were starting to notice what was happening. Some of them turned around in their seats to look at Linda and the two guards. "Ma'am, we have rules about dress code for graduation ceremonies," Greg said. "No work uniforms are allowed. This is a special event, and everyone needs to dress appropriately." Linda felt her face get hot with embarrassment. More people were looking at her now. She could see some mothers whispering to each other and pointing in her direction. The principal was still talking on stage, but Linda could barely hear him anymore. All she could think about was how out of place she looked. "Please," Linda whispered to the guards. "I know I don't look right, but this is my son's only graduation. I've been working extra shifts for months to pay for his college. I fell asleep after work and didn't have time to change clothes." Tony shook his head. "I understand, but rules are rules." You can wait outside until it's time for the individual diplomas, then you can come back in to see your son get his diploma. But that's not for another hour, Linda said. I want to hear his name called for the honor roll. He worked so hard for good grades. Greg crossed his arms. I'm sorry, but that medical costume is not appropriate for a formal graduation ceremony. You're making other families uncomfortable. Linda felt like she might cry. She looked around and saw that even more people were staring at her now. Some parents looked angry, like she was ruining their children's special day. Others looked sorry for her, which made Linda feel even worse. This isn't a costume, Linda said, trying to keep her voice steady. This is my uniform. I save lives in these clothes. I just spent 16 hours taking care of 3 soldiers who got hurt in an accident. I came here straight from the hospital because I promised my son I would be at his graduation. Tony looked a little sorry, but he still did not change his mind. Look, I understand you work hard, but everyone else found a way to dress up for today. You should have planned better. Linda felt anger rising in her chest, but she tried to stay calm. She did not want to make a scene at Danny's graduation. I work at the hospital emergency room, she said quietly. Sometimes soldiers come in hurt, very badly, and I can't leave them. I couldn't plan when that would happen. That's not our problem, Greg said. The school has a dress code for all events, no exceptions. By now, the whispering around Linda was getting louder. She could hear bits of what people were saying. Some parents were saying she should have known better. Others were saying she was being disrespectful to the other families. A few people were defending her, saying she was just a mother trying to see her son graduate. Linda stood up from her seat. She felt defeated and embarrassed. She had worked so hard to be here for Danny, and now she was being asked to leave because of her clothes. She looked at the stage and saw Danny looking around the audience. He was probably looking for her. Can I at least tell my son where I'm going? Linda asked. He'll wonder where I am. You can talk to him after the ceremony, Tony said. But right now you need to step outside. Linda picked up her purse and started walking toward the door. She could feel everyone watching her. Some parents moved their children away from her as she walked by, like her work clothes might be dirty or dangerous. Linda kept her head down and tried not to cry. As she reached the door, Linda heard a woman behind her say loudly, "Some people have no respect. How can she come to a graduation looking like that?" Another woman replied, "She probably doesn't even work at a real hospital. That's probably just a Halloween costume." Linda stopped walking. She turned around and saw the women who were talking about her. They were both wearing expensive dresses and jewelry. Their children were probably good students from nice families, who never had to worry about money. "I do work at a real hospital," Linda said, loud enough for them to hear. "I take care of soldiers who get hurt fighting for our country. I'm sorry my uniform offends you, but I'm proud of what I do." The women looked surprised that Linda had heard them and responded. They whispered something to each other and turned away. Linda felt a little better for standing up for herself, but she still had to leave the auditorium. As Linda walked toward the exit, she looked back one more time at Danny on the stage. He was still looking around the audience, trying to find her. Linda's heart broke as she realized she would miss hearing his name called for the honor roll. She had worked so hard to be here, and now she was being sent away because she looked different from everyone else. Linda was almost at the door when she heard a deep voice behind her say, "Wait a minute." She turned around and saw a tall man in a Navy uniform standing up from his seat. He was wearing dress blues with shiny buttons and ribbons on his chest. The uniform looked perfect, like he had spent hours making sure everything was just right. The man looked directly at the 2 security guards. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. His voice was calm but strong. Other people in the auditorium started to notice what was happening. Tony Blake, the younger security guard, looked nervous. "No problem, sir. We're just asking this lady to step outside because she's not dressed appropriately for the ceremony." The Navy man looked at Linda, then back at the guards. "Not dressed appropriately?" he asked. "She's wearing medical scrubs. She's clearly a healthcare worker." "That doesn't matter," Greg Ross said, trying to sound tough. "The school has a dress code for graduation ceremonies. No work uniforms allowed." The Navy man stepped closer to Linda. She could see his name tag. Now it said Commander J. Sullivan. He looked at her face carefully like he was trying to remember something. "Excuse me, ma'am," Commander Sullivan said to Linda. "Do you work at San Diego General Hospital?" Linda was surprised by the question. "Yes, I do. I'm a trauma nurse in the emergency room." Commander Sullivan's face changed. He smiled and nodded. "I thought I recognized you. You took care of my friend Pete Rodriguez about 6 months ago. He was hurt pretty badly in Afghanistan. You stayed with him all night when he was scared and in pain." Linda remembered Pete. He was a young soldier who had been badly hurt by a bomb. He was only 20 years old and kept asking for his mother. Linda had held his hand and talked to him until his family could fly in from Texas. "Pete talked about you for weeks after he got better," Commander Sullivan continued. "He said you were like an angel. You made him feel safe when he thought he was going to die." Linda felt tears in her eyes. She remembered Pete, but she had no idea that he had talked about her to his friends. "How is Pete doing now?" she asked. "He's doing great. He's back home, in Texas with his family. He walks with a little limp, but he's alive because of nurses like you." Commander Sullivan turned to face the security guards. "This woman has saved more lives than most people will ever touch. She's taken care of my friends, my teammates, and hundreds of other soldiers who came back hurt from serving our country." Tony looked uncomfortable. "That's nice, sir, but we still have rules about dress codes." "Rules?" Commander Sullivan asked. His voice got a little louder. "Let me tell you about rules. This woman follows the most important rule of all. She helps people who are hurt and scared. She doesn't care what time it is or how tired she is. When soldiers need help, she's there for them." Other people in the auditorium were listening now. The principal had stopped talking on stage and was looking toward the back of the room to see what was happening. Commander Sullivan looked around the auditorium. "Are there any other military personnel here today?" he called out. Linda was amazed to see several men in military uniforms stand up throughout the auditorium. There was a Marine in dress blues sitting near the front. 2 Army soldiers in their dress uniforms were sitting with their families in the middle section. A Navy SEAL in his whites was sitting on the other side of the room. One by one, more military men stood up. Linda counted 8, then 9, then 10 men in uniform. They all started walking toward the back of the auditorium where Linda was standing. A Marine sergeant named Mike Chen was the first to reach them. "What's going on here, Commander?" he asked. "These security guards are asking this nurse to leave because she's wearing scrubs," Commander Sullivan explained. "This is Linda Martinez. She works at San Diego General taking care of our wounded soldiers." Sergeant Chen looked at Linda with respect. "Ma'am, did you take care of a Marine named Bobby Williams about 2 months ago? He had burns on his arms and legs." Linda nodded. "Yes, I remember Bobby. Sweet kid from Georgia. He was so worried about his girlfriend back home." "That's my little brother," Sergeant Chen said. "He told our whole family about the nurse who sang to him when he couldn't sleep because of the pain. Was that you?" Linda felt embarrassed. "I just hummed a little." It seemed to help him relax. More military men had gathered around them now. A Navy SEAL named Chris Davis spoke up. "Ma'am, I think you took care of my buddy Tom Jackson. He lost his leg in an explosion last year." "Tom Jackson," Linda repeated. "He was so angry at first he didn't want anyone to help him." "That sounds like Tom," Chris said with a sad smile. "But he told me about a nurse who never gave up on him. She kept coming back to his room even when he was mean to her. She helped him learn to walk again with his new leg." An Army captain named Alex Johnson stepped forward. "I was at the hospital 3 weeks ago visiting my injured soldiers. I saw you working with a young private who had lost his hearing from a bomb blast. You learned sign language just so you could talk to him." Linda remembered that too. The young private was so scared because he couldn't hear anything. Linda had asked another nurse to teach her some basic sign language so she could communicate with him and make him feel less alone. By now, all 10 military men were standing around Linda. The security guards looked very uncomfortable. Other families in the auditorium were watching and listening. Some of them looked ashamed for complaining about Linda's appearance. Commander Sullivan faced the security guards again. "This woman has probably saved more American lives than anyone else in this room. She works 16-hour shifts taking care of our wounded heroes. She came here straight from the hospital after working all night because she didn't want to miss her son's graduation. Her son is graduating today? Asked Lieutenant Davis, another Navy SEAL who had joined the group. Yes, Linda said quietly. Danny Martinez, he's on the honor roll. Lieutenant Davis smiled. Then she definitely needs to be here to see that. Ma'am, you should be sitting in the front row, not being asked to leave. The security guards were now surrounded by 10 military men who all respected Linda. Greg Ross cleared his throat nervously. Look, we were just following orders about the dress code. Whose orders? Commander Sullivan asked. The principal's. Orders, Tony Blake said quickly. Commander Sullivan looked toward the stage where Principal Adams was standing with a microphone, watching everything that was happening. Then maybe we should talk to the principal. An older man sitting nearby stood up. His name was Frank Lopez, and he was wearing a Veterans of Foreign Wars hat. I fought in Vietnam, he said loudly. If this nurse has been taking care of our wounded soldiers, then she's a hero. Heroes can wear whatever they want to wear. Other veterans in the audience started to stand up. Soon Linda was surrounded by not just the 10 military men in uniform, but also older veterans and their families. People who had been whispering about her appearance now looked ashamed. Commander Sullivan put his hand gently on Linda's shoulder. Ma'am, you're not going anywhere. You're going to sit down and watch your son graduate, and anyone who has a problem with what you're wearing can talk to all of us. Linda felt overwhelmed by the kindness of these strangers who had become her protectors. She had come to the graduation feeling embarrassed and alone. Now she was surrounded by people who understood the importance of what she did every day at the hospital. The two security guards looked at each other, then at the crowd of military personnel surrounding Linda. They realized they were not going to win this fight. Tony Blake spoke first. Maybe we can make an exception this time, he said quietly. Greg Ross nodded quickly. Yes, an exception, for medical personnel. Commander Sullivan smiled. That sounds like a good decision. The two security guards walked away quietly, leaving Linda standing with the 10 military men who had come to help her. She still could not believe what had just happened. 5 minutes ago, she was being asked to leave her son's graduation. Now, she was surrounded by soldiers and veterans who called her a hero. Commander Sullivan guided Linda back to her seat in the back row. You sit right here, ma'am, he said kindly. And don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong here. But Linda did not get to sit down right away. Frank Lopez, the old Vietnam veteran, was walking toward her with his wife. He had tears in his eyes as he approached. Young lady, Frank said, I want to shake your hand. My grandson Tommy was hurt in Iraq 2 years ago. He was at San Diego, general for 3 weeks. He told me about a nurse there who treated all the soldiers like they were her own children. I think that was you. Linda remembered Tommy Lopez. He was a Marine who had been hurt by a roadside bomb. He was only 19 years old and cried every night because he missed his family. Linda had called his grandfather Frank several times to give him updates on Tommy's condition. Tommy is doing well now, Frank continued. He's married and has a baby daughter. He always said he wanted to thank the nurse who helped him get through the hardest time of his life. Frank's wife, Maria Lopez, hugged Linda tightly. Thank you for taking care of our grandson, she whispered. You saved his life and his spirit. More families began approaching Linda. A woman named Carol Johnson came over with her husband. Are you Linda Martinez? She asked. Yes, I am, Linda replied, still confused by all the attention. My son Rick was at your hospital last month, Carol said. He had been hurt in a training accident. He said there was a nurse named Linda who stayed with him when he had nightmares. She would sit by his bed and talk to him until he fell asleep. Linda remembered Rick too. He was afraid to close his eyes because he kept seeing the accident that hurt him. Linda had worked extra hours just to make sure someone was with him when the nightmares came. Rick is back with his unit now, Carol continued, but he calls me every week to ask if I found a way to thank that nurse Linda. I guess today I found her. People throughout the auditorium were starting to stand up and clap. At first it was just a few people near Linda. Then more families joined in. Soon, half the auditorium was standing and applauding. Principal Adams, who was still on stage, looked confused by what was happening. He spoke into his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if we could please return to our seats, we have a graduation ceremony to continue." But the clapping did not stop. It got louder. Commander Sullivan walked toward the stage and asked Principal Adams if he could use the microphone for a moment. "Sir, I think the audience would like to know what's happening," Commander Sullivan said. Principal Adams handed him the microphone reluctantly. Commander Sullivan faced the audience and spoke clearly so everyone could hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you about someone special who is here with us today. Her name is Linda Martinez, and she is a trauma nurse at San Diego General Hospital. For the past 12 years, she has taken care of wounded soldiers who come back from overseas." The auditorium became very quiet as people listened. Linda felt her face turn red with embarrassment, but Commander Sullivan continued. "Linda works 16-hour shifts, sometimes longer, making sure our wounded heroes get the best care possible. She holds their hands when they're scared. She stays late when they can't sleep. She treats every soldier like he's her own son." Commander Sullivan pointed toward Linda. "Linda came here today straight from the hospital after working all night. She was taking care of 3 Marines who were hurt in a training accident. She didn't have time to change clothes because she didn't want to miss her son's graduation." The audience was completely silent now. Some parents who had complained about Linda's appearance earlier looked ashamed of themselves. A few minutes ago, 2 security guards asked Linda to leave because she was wearing medical scrubs instead of formal clothes. Commander Sullivan continued. "But I want everyone to know that those scrubs represent more honor and service than most formal wear in this room." The applause started again, but this time it was different. It was not polite clapping like at the beginning of the ceremony. This was real appreciation. People were clapping because they understood what Linda had sacrificed to be there. Danny Martinez, who was sitting on stage with his graduating class, was looking out at the audience with tears in his eyes. He could see his mother standing in the back, surrounded by people who were honoring her. Danny had always known his mother was special, but seeing an entire auditorium recognize her sacrifice made him prouder than he had ever been in his life. Some of Danny's classmates were asking him questions. "Is that really your mom?" asked his friend Steve. "She takes care of soldiers?" "Yeah," Danny said, wiping his eyes. "She works at the hospital. She's always taking care of people who get hurt." "That's so cool," said another classmate named Amy. "My dad was in the Army. He would think your mom is awesome." The applause continued for several minutes. Commander Sullivan returned the microphone to Principal Adams, who looked much more respectful now than he had before. "Thank you, Commander," Principal Adams said. "And thank you, Mrs. Martinez, for your service to our community and our military families." Linda felt overwhelmed by all the attention. She had never wanted to be the center of attention at Danny's graduation. She just wanted to watch her son get his diploma. But now she realized that this moment was about more than just her. It was about all the soldiers she had helped over the years. It was about showing people that heroes come in many forms, including tired nurses in wrinkled scrubs. As Linda finally sat down, the families around her made room for her in the front rows, instead of making her stay in the back. Mrs. Johnson, whose son Rick had been Linda's patient, invited Linda to sit with her family. "You should be up front where you can see your son better," Mrs. Johnson said. Frank Lopez and his wife Maria also moved closer to Linda. "We want to sit near a hero," Frank said with a smile. The 10 military men who had first stood up for Linda spread out through the auditorium, but they all made sure Linda knew they were still watching over her. Commander Sullivan gave her a small salute before returning to his seat. Linda looked toward the stage and saw Danny watching her with the biggest smile she had ever seen on his face. He mouthed the words, "I love you, Mom," and Linda felt her heart fill with joy. For the first time since she had arrived at the graduation, Linda felt like she belonged there. She was not just a tired nurse in dirty scrubs anymore. She was a mother, a hero, and a valued member of her community. Principal Adams returned to the podium and continued with the ceremony. But now, instead of feeling embarrassed and out of place, Linda sat proudly in the front row, surrounded by new friends who understood the value of service and sacrifice. The graduation ceremony continued, But Linda knew that this day would be remembered for more than just diplomas and speeches. It would be remembered as the day a community came together to honor someone who had quietly served others without asking for recognition or thanks. The graduation ceremony continued with Linda sitting proudly in the front row. She could see Danny clearly now, and every time he looked at her, he smiled so big that it made her heart happy. When Principal Adams called Danny's name for the honor, "Roll!" Linda clapped louder than anyone else in the auditorium. "Danny Martinez, graduating with high honors, 3.8 grade point average," Principal Adams announced. Linda stood up and cheered for her son. The families around her clapped too, and some of them patted Linda on the back. Commander Sullivan, who was sitting a few rows behind her, whistled loudly and gave Danny a thumbs up. When it was time for students to walk across the stage and receive their diplomas, Linda's heart was beating fast with excitement. She had worked so many extra shifts and missed so many things to make sure Danny could graduate and go to college. Now she was finally going to see him get his diploma. "Danny Martinez," Principal Adams called out. Danny walked across the stage, in his cap and gown. When he got his diploma, he held it up high and looked right at Linda. He pointed to her and mouthed, "This is for you, Mom." Linda started crying happy tears and blew him a kiss. The audience clapped for Danny, but they clapped extra loud because everyone now knew his story. They knew his mother had raised him by herself while working as a nurse. They knew she had sacrificed so much to help him succeed. After the ceremony ended, Linda waited for Danny outside the auditorium. When he found her, he ran to her and gave her the biggest hug she had ever received. "Mom, I am so proud of you," Danny said, still hugging her tight. "Everyone was talking about how amazing you are. My friends think you're a superhero." "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart," Linda said. "You worked so hard for this day." "But Mom, did you see what happened in there? All those soldiers stood up for you. Everyone was clapping for you. I always knew you were special, but now everyone else knows it too." Before Linda could answer, Commander Sullivan approached them with the other military men who had helped her earlier. "Mrs. Martinez," Commander Sullivan said, "we wanted to talk to you before we left." "Please, call me Linda," she replied. "Linda, what happened today was important. You've been helping our soldiers for years without anyone knowing how special you are. Today, people found out. We think there might be more people who want to thank you." Sergeant Mike Chen stepped forward. "Ma'am, my brother Bobby wants to meet you in person someday. He lives in Georgia now, but he said he wants to come to California just to say thank you." Lieutenant Chris Davis added, "My friend Tom Jackson, the one who lost his leg, he wants to invite you to his wedding next month. He said you helped save his life and he wants you to be there when he starts his new life." Linda felt overwhelmed again. She had never expected any of this attention. "I was just doing my job," she said quietly. "No, ma'am," said Captain Alex Johnson. "You were doing much more than your job. You were caring for people like they were family." As they were talking, more families from the graduation came over to meet Linda. Some of them had military connections and others just wanted to say thank you for her service to the community. Carol Johnson, whose son Rick had been Linda's patient, brought over several other mothers. "Linda, we've been talking and we want to help with Danny's college expenses. We know you've been working extra shifts to save money." Linda was shocked. "Oh no, I couldn't accept that. You don't even know us, but we do know you," said Maria Lopez, Frank's wife. "We know you're the kind of person who helps others without thinking about yourself. Now we want to help you." Frank Lopez nodded. "My grandson Tommy has been saving money to thank you somehow. When I tell him I met you today, he's going to want to help pay for Danny's college." Danny looked at his mother with amazement. "Mom, these people want to help us because of how you help others. That's incredible." Over the next hour, Linda met more than 50 families who had connections to soldiers she had treated. Some of them had sons or daughters who had been her patients. Others had friends or relatives who had told them about the special nurse at San Diego General Hospital. A local news reporter named Jennifer Smith approached Linda as she was talking with families. "Mrs. Martinez, I'm from Channel 7 News. We heard about what happened here today. Would you be willing to do an interview? People should know about the work you do." Linda felt nervous about being on television. "I don't know, I'm not good at talking to cameras," Danny encouraged her. "Mom, you should do it. People need to know about nurses like you," Commander Sullivan agreed. "Linda, there are probably hundreds of military families who would like to thank you but don't know how to find you. This could help them." Linda finally agreed to do a short interview. The next day, the story was on the local news. The reporter told about the nurse who came to her son's graduation in scrubs after working all night, and how military families stood up to honor her service. Within a week, the story had spread much further. National news stations picked it up. Military blogs shared it online. Linda started getting letters and emails from soldiers and their families all across the country. Some of the letters were from soldiers Linda had treated years ago. They told her how much her kindness had meant to them during the worst times of their lives. Other letters were from families who had heard about her story and wanted to say thank you for taking care of America's heroes. The hospital where Linda worked also heard about the story. The head of the hospital, Dr. Patricia Williams, called Linda into her office. "Linda, I've been hearing amazing things about you," Dr. Williams said. "Patients and their families have been calling to tell us how special you are. We had no idea how much you mean to the military community." The hospital decided to give Linda a special award for her service. They also gave her a raise and offered to help pay for Danny's college education. But the most important changes were the personal ones. Danny decided he wanted to become a nurse like his mother. "Mom, you showed me that helping people is the most important thing you can do with your life," he told her. Danny started studying nursing at San Diego State University. He often came to visit Linda at the hospital to learn from her. The soldiers Linda treated loved meeting Danny and hearing about how proud Linda was of him. Commander Sullivan kept in touch with Linda and Danny. He became like a big brother to Danny, giving him advice about college and life. He also made sure other military personnel knew about Linda's work, so she got the recognition she deserved. The two security guards who had asked Linda to leave the graduation, Tony Blake and Greg Ross, both apologized to her in person. They attended special training to learn about military families and first responders. The school changed its dress code policy to always welcome people in uniform, including medical uniforms. Frank Lopez and his wife Maria became close friends with Linda and Danny. Frank often told other veterans about Linda, and many of them found ways to volunteer at the hospital where she worked. Years later, when Danny graduated from nursing school, Linda was there to watch him get his degree. This time, she wore her best dress and sat in the front row. But she also wore a small pin on her dress that said, "Proud Military Nurse." When Danny's name was called, the entire auditorium stood up and clapped. But they weren't just clapping for Danny. They were clapping for both mother and son, who had dedicated their lives to helping others. Commander Sullivan was there that day, too. After the ceremony, he shook Danny's hand and said, "Your mother taught you well. Now go out there and help people the way she does." Linda realized that the embarrassing day at Danny's high school graduation had become the most important day of their lives. It was the day their community learned to see past appearances and recognize true service. It was the day Linda learned that her quiet work had touched more lives than she ever imagined. Most importantly, it was the day that showed Danny what real heroism looks like. It doesn't always wear a cape or carry a weapon. Sometimes it wears scrubs and works night shifts at a hospital, caring for people who need help the most.